All right, so now we have our first panel of the day, and this is Learning with AI, which is appropriate since we are at a university. I'm going to introduce our panelists, starting from the far right. Dr. Daniel DeFreez joined the Southern Oregon University faculty in 2019, where he's been teaching AI engineering since 2021. He has been published in leading software engineering conferences and has developed tools that have identified hundreds of bugs in open source software. His work focuses on preparing students for an AI-driven future, including advancements like textbooks that can explain themselves. Dr. DeFreez holds a PhD in computer science from UC Davis, an MS from Southern Oregon University, and a BS in sociology from the University of Oregon. Ian Ingram is the founder and CEO of Neurovin AI Consulting and Prompt Engineering Services. He is a passionate educator and advocate for the safe deployment of AI technologies. Ian founded Neurovin to meet the rapidly increasing need for AI literacy and its strategic application in business. Ian believes we are at an unprecedented technological inflection point and that the future is ours to change. AI technology is still in its infancy, as is Ian's new family, but it's evolving at a rate that entire industries cannot keep up with. It's imperative that we start and continue the conversation now. Dr. Casey Shillam is the Provost and Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs at Southern Oregon University, where she leads efforts to maintain academic excellence and student success. She collaborates across divisions to drive organizational success with a focus on access for all students. Prior to SOU, Dr. Shillam served as Dean and Professor at the University of Portland School of Nursing and Health Innovations. Dr. Randy Weber became president of Rogue Community College in July 2022. He focuses on enhancing the college's strengths, supporting faculty and staff, and creating post-secondary pathways for Rogue Valley residents. Dr. Weber prioritizes innovative problem solving and building community partnerships that lead to higher paying jobs and a stronger regional workforce. With expertise in strategic planning, budgeting, accreditation, and student affairs, he advocates for ongoing training in teaching technologies and student engagement. Crickets already?
I know.
Yeah, tough crowd. Okay, so as a moderator, I'm going to toss a question to the panelists, and I encourage you to riff off each other, keep the conversation going, and if needed, I'll toss in another question. So we want to talk about AI in education, and please also do remember to fill out those cards with questions you'd like to have us address during our community forum later today. Okay, so here's a question. AI in education is not so much about replacing teachers. It's more about enhancing learning. And Kim Freeze talked about this, I think, very eloquently yesterday, especially in the context of neurodivergent individuals. But if we don't control how it's implemented, could we risk AI dictating what learning even means? Who'd like to start with that softball question?
That's an easy one.
You chimed in.
I was being sarcastic when I said that's an easy one, but yes. So I've really been thinking a lot about this in terms of the role of the responsibility that we have in higher education, right? I think we have responsibility in all of education, but looking at it through my lens in higher education, I think back to when ChatGPT was coming out and we were all anticipating what that was going to look like. I distinctly remember the feeling that I was having was the same feeling that I had when I went skydiving. I was able to go skydiving with the Golden Knights. That's the United States Army's elite skydiving team. So I felt safe. I didn't feel terrified, but I was up there at 15,000 feet and looking out over the entire world. I was so anxious and excited and scared, but not in a terrified way. That's how I felt when this idea of ChatGPT coming out. Then, when it did, and I started to think about how my faculty, so this was when I was at the University of Portland, School of Nursing and Health Innovations, and the faculty, they were the ones who were terrified. They were terrified because they saw this tool as something that was going to replace them. So that idea of where I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. That's pretty scary, but I might die, but I probably won't. And them being like, oh my gosh, no, this is the end of us as a profession. And so what I learned from that experience was my job as a leader is to help learn enough about these emerging technologies that I can help the people that I'm leading know how to use these technologies. Heather did such a beautiful job of describing the changes we're going to see in the workforce, but as leaders in higher ed, we will have to shepherd the faculty and the students through this journey in a way where they understand we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to teach how to use this ethically and how to have a good, strong moral compass when we use it. But we can and we will be able to foster this as a way to expand education and not replace teachers.
I think I agree with pretty much everything Casey said, and I'm going to expand upon it a little bit. And it's interesting how we have the group settle, right? We've got the kind of the administrative eggheads over here, and then the practitioners over there. So we're really excited to hear how both the student and the faculty live with it. But let me give some context from my point of view. I think as educational institutions, at our core, what we are is we are learning institutions. Our job is to make sure that we are preparing people for the world that they're about to go into, and that looks a lot different with different students, where they come to us, where they want to go. So the word I frequently use is relevant. How do we ensure that the work we do is relevant, that we are preparing students in a relevant manner for workforce, for walking into society, and it looks a lot different. And over history, as Casey shared, right, we've got faculty in different things, and so the way AI hit most of our institutions was this spike in ChatGPT usage on students using it to support their work, often in a way that was identified as plagiarism, and so it became this threat to the educational environment first and foremost. And so that's what faculty saw it as. And I am very sensitive to our faculty and where they're at in their journey. It wasn't that long ago that our faculty, who maybe are near retirement today, when they walked into the classroom, they were the sage on the stage. They were where the student went to get their source of information. They were the expert on the topic. And then Google and search came along, and lo and behold, you could kind of fact check your instructor and say, well, actually, I found this thing. And so that became a little intimidating. Now you fast forward to AI, and I can become a subject matter expert, not just a fact checker, in short time. And I think about our faculty who have this tremendous responsibility to help our students learn, and what does learning look like. And I'll leave you with one story on this. I could talk all day, but I want to hear the other two. One of the aha moments I had from an instructor was at our accreditation conference in Seattle a little over a year ago, and it was a biological science instructor who embraced this and said, you know, I looked at the core outcomes of my class, and the core outcomes of my class were really critical thinking, processing skills. And they said, well, if students are going to use AI and I'm going to have a hard time stopping them from doing it, what I want to do is I want to challenge their critical thinking. I want to see how they process. So I said, here's my original question like I have. If you're going to use ChatGPT, let me know the prompt you use. Let me know what it came up with. Let me know then where you took it from there. So basically, show me your work to how you got to your final answer. And then that instructor got to be able to continue to assess critical thinking and processing in a way different than how do you remember which molecules belong over here versus over here. And so that's part of the way it's changing is we have a responsibility to make sure that people, however they're leaving us, are leaving us with these kinds of skills in hand because their industry, their jobs, their careers, as Heather alluded to earlier, are gonna evolve at such a rapid pace that if they don't know how to change and think and process, I'm concerned that they're going to be left behind.
All right, we've heard from the academic or the administrative eggheads, as Randy has said. What's it like in reality, boys?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first since, so there was a lot of talk about the role of the faculty and labor replacement. So that's my job that we're talking about replacing. And so I think that this really is an opportunity or an obligation for us as educators to introspect on what our purpose really is and sort of why do we have this job? What are we trying to achieve? What is our role as human beings, right? And I think as Randy was saying, this isn't the first time that we've gone through this, right? So Google, Wikipedia, all of these things happen again, the sort of sage on the stage kind of idea. I mean, we should have, as educators, realize, and I think a lot of us did, I'm not sort of criticizing us saying that we didn't, but that was a broken paradigm long ago, right? It wasn't AI that made lectures boring. And so we have been grappling this for a long time. And so it's come to a head and we have to think about what our role is. And I think we do have a role still, and that is because we are humans. And so I think the original question was, are we at risk of AI dictating what learning even means? And I'm tempted to just say yes. But I suppose, as some sort of hope, right, that I think that part of what that is the role of us as humans is to guide that and to curate that. And it's been a really interesting experience for me trying to teach in the era of AI because I want students to use AI for everything they do. There was a lot of interesting discussion last night about mastery and what mastery means in the arts, and I think that there's a similar thing going on in computer programming, what I teach, about what it means to master coding and skills and this sort of quote-unquote vibe coding revolution and all of these things. And so what role do we play? And I think that as humans, we can make human connections to students in ways that AI really can't, right? And so there's a lot of, I've been trying to teach with AI for a long time, and it has led me to strange realizations, things like the importance of grading, right? Like notoriously, professors hate grading. I don't much like grading either. But there are things that you can do, like so when a human person writes a test, and answers to a test, you can see what they wrote in the margins. You can see what their notes are. You can see how stressed they look when they took it. You can really sort of manage it as a group. And I think those are things, just sort of that human connection that we can have with the people in the room that we're present with, knowing them as human beings, knowing what's working, not working for them, is something that is not really replaceable currently, at least, right? So all of this is quickly evolving. And sort of trying to focus on how we make those connections and inspire people to learn in that way, because simply delivering knowledge was broken before AI, and it's definitely not efficient now. And so it's an opportunity for us to really think like, what is our purpose here, and how do we deliver the most value possible?
Hello, I have a far different perspective from the other members up here. I'm a student, and I would like to say that I don't want to represent the student experience here, though. I would like to give my own personal opinion on my own kind of intellectual and kind of knowledge gathering journey. But I don't want to speak for students in other departments. I'm a computer science student, and so I've been able to use AI, and I've been encouraged to use AI, and I can have AI do my assignments for me, and that's encouraged. But that's not the same for other departments. So I can speak very, very highly about AI, but I just wanted to make that distinction. I am really happy to be at Southern Oregon University because of how unique the organization is. It's small classrooms. It's teachers who can actually have one-on-one relationships with the students and hold us to a standard of being not just obligated learners, but encourage us to be self-regulated learners, to be curious. And I think AI works best when you are curious in the context of learning. Everyone knows that you can copy paste your assignment in AI and have it come out with something that's A minus grade work. And in doing so, you can kind of skirt the critical thinking process. You can kind of cheat. And that's, for many, the easiest path. But the faculty that I've talked to have taken the time to learn how to use this technology and understand its capabilities and limitations so that they can have those conversations with the students. Again, one-on-one in these small classrooms so that you can kind of mitigate some of the what would be the easy path to take the AI answer at face value and not learn. And we've talked about some of the technical pitfalls that happen. AI can hallucinate. I think that's a big thing when it comes to learning. What it tells you should be true, and that's not always the case. And so how do you verify that? And kind of going back to what Dr. Weber was saying, we faced that with Google. We faced that with Wikipedia. Always cite your sources. These are not new paradigms, but now there's a renewed challenge to pursue truth in learning. I'm going to pass it off just to keep the conversation going. Yeah.
Can I follow up next? Because I wanted to thank Ian, of course, for being so clear that he is representing his experience in computer science. And that's very different than what we might see in some of our liberal arts courses. But I want to give an example of something that happened last year that was really quite remarkable on our campus. And that was we had an English professor, Dr. How did I just lose her? English professor. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Margaret. Prof. And Dr. Prakash Chanjiri, who is a philosophy professor. So last year in the spring, they co-taught a course, so from English and philosophy, that was focused on the ethical use of AI. And it was a fascinating class. I didn't get to see the class as it unfolded over the term, but I did get to read the final reports and hear about the work that the students did in that class. So interdisciplinary group of students, and they did a presentation at last year's creativity conference here. So they presented at a creativity conference on the ethical use of AI. Then in the fall of this year, a student who was an English major and another student who was an education major wound up doing a statewide presentation for Oregon's education department on the ethical use of AI. And that was a wonderful experience, again, where you have faculty in our humanities who are embracing this opportunity to help with teaching that ethical lens, that the philosophical approaches to how we help support our young people in growing in this area so that they are prepared to go into any field. And so that's I just wanted to offer that up as an example that is completely different than what you've heard, but I think that as an institution and as a field of higher education, we have to be thinking about how we support faculty and students in that work.
I think the thinking along the lines of, how does post-secondary higher education present itself from going the way of the dodo bird is a little bit like talking about, for generations, we have been the standard of approval, the gatekeeper for readiness for workforce. And so I will say we have some industries that are right now a little more, I'll just call them AI proof, in that they require certain certifications and licensures in order to step into workforce. And so we've determined our most of our healthcare professionals, our nurses, so that's program at our place, dental hygiene, program at our place, paramedic, CDL, teaching licensures at K-12. We've determined that these are the hoops you have to jump through in order to be ready for the workforce. I think where the greater threats exist is where the credential itself, the degree, was what determined your readiness. And what we're going to see is different employers say, I might identify readiness in a different way. And we're going to have to look and say, well, how can we continue to support you in that way? Something I heard in a conversation years ago was like, colleges are going to be okay, right? Because people don't want to hire an 18-year-old, they want to hire a 22-year-old. So if anything, you're just a placeholder for them so they can grow up for 4 years. And there's probably a lot of truth to that, right? Like just think of the human development that occurs when people are learning to move away from home, they're learning how to make independent decisions, and these are all life skills that are going to help them. I mean, I'm really nervous about an 18-year-old moving out of parents' house, buying a home, starting a family, less so than I am a 22, 30, so some of it's just a simple numbers game in the way human development works. But I think that where the programs that are the most vulnerable first are the ones that aren't going to look at industry. And we see it in manufacturing. We see it in technology. It's like, we've seen employers who, when open source coding came out and said, I no longer care about a credential. I'm going to put an open source code problem out there. And whoever solves it, that's the person qualified to work for me. So then we have computer science programs saying we don't have to worry about that. They're still going to come to our place and get our degree. But are they? And those are the questions we have to ask ourselves. And so we have a lot of programs. We work hard in our region to make sure that we're responsive to it. But then it also becomes dependent on our region to say, as best we can, here's our future economy, here's our future workforce, this is what you should be and could be helping us prepare them for. And so I think it's going to require partnerships in order for us to maintain relevance. But there are some of those kind of natural qualifiers that have been in place for years that will still to a certain degree be protected. I mean, I can think of friends I had in college and I came from very, very modest means, but I was somewhat envious of them at the time, where it's like they were sent off to college to grow up. They were going to go home and work for the family business that was really successful, but their parents wanted them to go away a little bit, grow up, then come back and work. So they knew the job they were going to have. They could have walked into that right out of high school. But so that piece will be in play for a little bit. But how we serve as that learning generator is key. And we've had problems for years where individuals, I hate to say this, and I'm going to, education is a product, one of the few in the world where people will pay more to get less. Where people will spend more for a degree with less barriers to child. And that's a scary thought, right? When we really want to be helping people learn, grow, think about how to problem solve. So if we know that exists already, what AI does is it puts that on steroids. Now, it can help you in all these ways we've talked about at the conference last night and today, really grow your curiosity, your inquiry, and grow as a person. But man, if you want the cheat code, it's provided a cheat code in a way that we've not seen much before.
I'd like to pick up on something you said, Randy, about the sage on the stage and how the role of the educator had already started to change before AI. I became an adjunct professor at Pepperdine in 2015. And as part of my training, they talked about the changing role of the educator from someone who deigns to give pearls of wisdom to the adoring and fawning student body, more to a facilitator. Because even then, students could look up and find all the information in the world, essentially. So our role wasn't to just spoon feed them knowledge, but to help them source information. And very importantly, as we shift from facts to likes, to help them verify the accuracy of the information and then the final step to synthesize it into something that's productive and relevant for them. And I found that helped me quite a lot, because I didn't think I had that many pearls of wisdom to give, frankly. But to help them along that journey, it was very helpful. And I think AI really helps accelerate that. And I think that leads us into our next question. Now that the role of educators and students has changed, how can we, as administrators and professors, help students and ensure that they develop critical thinking and problem-solving skills? You know, the flipped classroom is a great example of trying to maximize that higher learning time, the signal-to-noise ratio. So with AI and with the changing role of educators, how can we really kickstart the problem-solving mode in our students and give them even more for the money they're paying?
Can I know it's for the administrator.
That's for everybody, cattle call.
For it.
So I want to kind of tee up some of the answers that could potentially be given. I have made it my goal here before I get my degree to take AI augmented learning to the nth degree. What can I get done as a student if I put my mind to it? And been a few kind of jewels or tools that I could put in my toolbox that are extremely potent. They're distilled that would have come over the course of the 4 years that I've been here, but almost came within like the first month that I started really focusing on learning with AI. One of them was confidence. If let's just assume that AI is giving me what truthful information. We can get back to that, but I would be able to just, ask it for what I wanted. I could ask for the information I wanted to learn. I didn't have to go out, and we talked yesterday about the very specific Google search that, could Google tell you about Van Gogh's philosophical influences? And I think it was you who said that. And Google, you might have to do some research. You might have to read some articles and get this list of websites. But if I could just identify that that's what I wanted to learn, if I could clearly articulate where my misunderstanding met my understanding, and I could identify how to push that dial from not knowing to knowing just a little bit further, then I could learn at the pace that I needed to, and I could learn in the format that I needed to. So not only could it give me the information that I wanted, it gave me the information in exactly the format that I needed it to be in. If I'd been studying all weekend, I could have it give me bullet points. If I didn't quite understand, I could ask as many follow-up questions as I wanted to. If I really needed to have a full deep dive, it could give me paragraph upon paragraph with all of the citations sorted. And so that took away some of the frustration. There's cognitive load associated with learning, but there's a lot of wasted cognitive energy in doing the looking. Now that's a loaded statement, because when we talk about skills, we still need to be able to cultivate that skill. So part of the paradigm that I had as a student is, how can I take advantage of all of the efficiencies, the pinpoint, laser focus to information, but not lose what I believe are very, very valuable skills of doing research and asking the right questions and verifying the information. And so, I'll leave it at that. I think the student of today and of tomorrow should be able to take full advantage of AI, but it's still an open question of what gets lost along the way and how do we preserve that.
I have some thoughts, but Dr. DeFreez, did you want to chime
Sure,
in first
yeah.
as the faculty, the voice of the faculty?
I think maybe I just share sort of on things that I think have worked in response, sort of what should we do to help students sort of maintain their critical thinking. And I think general patterns that are successful are three things, and I'll expand on these. One, accelerate. Two, verify. And 3, I was trying to come up with a phrase on the spot, like expand boundaries or something. I'll explain. So accelerate. So maybe I'll relate a story from class just last week. So I allow students to use AI. I encourage them, I actually require them to do so, because I think we have an obligation for them to learn that as a skill, so they don't really have an option. So what do you do when the students can then quickly, if they use AI, solve all of your normal assignments, right? This is the position I'm in, is that everything I would traditionally teach them, you can copy and paste in, and it just does it, and it does it well, right? It's not like A- work, it's A+ work. And so what do you do? And so you can just move faster to some extent. Now, there are problems with this. So we got to a very, very difficult assignment towards the end of the term, and the student said to me, you know, this was the first time I actually ran into bugs. I had problems. AI couldn't do it, right? And so it's not that AI can solve everything. It certainly can't, right? Anybody that works as a professional in some sort of engineering discipline can tell you that it can't. It's very much so. But it takes a while to get there, and sort of pushing past these exercises and accelerating towards things where students are trying to actually build things. But verify what they're actually trying to do, right? And so I've traditionally hated giving tests, right? So I thought tests were, it just wasn't my kind of style of pedagogy. I give a lot more tests now because sort of out of a necessity, right? Like you have to somehow ground it. And this is, I think the panel is actually called Learning with AI, right? And and I think there's a split between learning and education here, and that is very difficult to reconcile. And I this shows up in the arts. I saw it last night, I think, if you were there when Micah was talking about what has happened to people's mastery and the sort of their use of skills in the art, and how much people are taking that labor. And so if we're talking about certification and how do we get people jobs and verify that they have the skills that we say that they have, which is very much part of our role as a university, this is difficult. And I'm not sure we have good answers of how you actually do that. You can verify, you can test. But learning, if we're just talking about what does it do to the learning process, I think it's amazing. And then talking about sort of the ways in which people can be exposed to things that they wouldn't normally be exposed to. This is my sort of third point of expanding your boundaries. So one of the things that has been most profound for me as ChatGPT came out was that it exposed me to disciplines and things in the arts that I would not have otherwise been exposed to, right? So so sort of shout out to the Center for Advancement in Teaching and Learning here at SOU for over a year ago doing stuff with communities trying to figure out how we should teach with AI. And so working with the theater department and doing projects with mimes and doing sort of organizational skills and these things that I don't have anything in, but because of ChatGPT being able to sort of raise the floor of what you can do in anything, it sort of makes it easier for interdisciplinary work to happen, right? So where that would have been very difficult because of how much you would have to learn to be able to have a meaningful collaboration, that's now a lot easier. And so I think those things are really encouraging. So I guess those are sort of 3 observations about sort of things that I think we can do today to improve how we teach.
And thinking about this question, my initial responses went straight into to follow up on Dan's comments, access and exposure. And so I have no idea why this popped in my head, but maybe it's because we're at SOU, a great school with arts and film. But the movie Good Will Hunting popped into my head. And if you think about the movie Good Will Hunting, right, you've got Matt Damon, the janitor at Harvard, who likes to surround himself with his brilliance, with these students who have access to all these educational opportunities and materials in front of them. But that access is what provided him kind of this equalization to knowledge. And when I think about AI, it is providing access and exposure and tremendous ways. I grew up in a town of 800 people, 14 people in my graduating class. I didn't get exposed to higher level math, higher level English. So we took assessment tests. I didn't score very well as schools with more robust curriculums. And so I didn't feel lesser than these other students, but they were better prepared than I was. So when I think about like AI and that coming out, our ability to build individualized education plans and our teachers in different school districts being able to challenge their students who want to learn in more powerful ways and having those resources, that excites me tremendously. I think we're going to have these tools available to us in manageable ways where we're going to see thought leaders come from backgrounds where historically we haven't. And so we've been saying for a while now, what are the best predictors of success? Their grit, their resilience, their persistence, but they're also access and opportunity. And I think in many ways, what we're bringing in today will increase access and opportunity. So yes, it's a responsibility for us, and it's a heavy burden, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get our resources to our people, that they don't feel intimidated. And we're talking a lot about the teaching and learning, and there are other components to working with industry and workforce, working internally with operations. But I'm a pretty darn naturally optimistic person, and so where I see the opportunity, and my belief comes from, is that we are going to be providing opportunities to people who have been disenfranchised and left behind for way too many years, and I think that I can't wait to see what the future leaders in thought and in practice look like 20, 30 years from now.
So as the provost of Southern Oregon University, I don't think that I should go through this presentation without saying the word pedagogy. It's very important. It's a very important word in academia. But I want to go back to what you were talking about in terms of how we have to shift the profession of education from that historical perspective of being a sage on the stage, of feeling like, okay, I'm the expert who is in the room to impart all of this knowledge on students. And I want to share just a little story with you about how we really have to reflect on pedagogical philosophy, because the way we go into this education, this learning and teaching relationship with students, it has changed so drastically in such a short period of time that a lot of faculty, K through 12 educators, those who are in higher education, they were taught how to teach from people who had been teaching for 20 and 30 years prior. So when we think about that historical practice of teaching and how we teach, we've really got to think about how do we shift that at the pace that we need it to change. So I'm going to share a little story that, I'm just telling about all my deep fears today. So I shared about, my feeling about skydiving and ChatGPT and how those were similar. I was far more terrified of nothing in the world than my first lecture as a faculty. I was an instructor. I was still in graduate school, and I was teaching part-time, and it was this summer I taught a clinical course, which that was easy, right? I'm a faculty out in the clinical setting. I'm a clinician. I'm an expert clinician. I know what I'm doing as a nurse. But I was able to connect with students because it was that practical application. But that fall, in my first lecture class, oh my gosh, I think I probably lost 30 years of my life in that 45-minute lecture. I was terrified, and it was awful. I stood at the lectern, and I read every word on every slide. Oh yeah. I know you're jealous that you were not in that class. Dr. DeFreez, I can teach you some skills later about how to really, really hone in on that kind of pedagogy. It was terrible, right? It was awful. But it's what I was taught from my mentor who had been on faculty for 30 years. So fast forward to about 5 years ago, I served on a national task force to completely revise all of nursing education's accreditation standards, okay? Going into that work, we had to think differently, knowing nursing education was changing, knowing that we had to move to competencies because we couldn't keep cramming all of this evolving knowledge into students' head, right? Think about where medical knowledge is today versus even just 5 years ago. We couldn't teach students how to keep memorizing. We had to teach them how to critically think and how to make clinical judgments. And so that is the framework that I see what we need to do for all of higher education, for all of all of education altogether, because that's the way that we're going to start keeping up much more quickly, is when we help teach our educators how to teach the students of the future.
Tell me about teaching terror, Casey. My first class that I taught was 4 hours long.
Oh.
And I was sure the students were going to say, Professor, you seem like an okay guy, but do you have any idea what you're doing? Just sheer terror. And I remember teaching the class, and I thought, oh my gosh, it's going way too fast. I need to slow it down. So I asked all the students, hey, tell me about yourself and what you'd like from the class. And when they were done with that, I realized I didn't have enough time for the rest of the material. I want to pick up on this question of problem-solving skills and poke at it a little bit more. Randy, you talked about resilience and grit. This challenge of getting our students to really hone in on problem-solving, they can use ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity, and they can easily take the first off-ramp on the problem-solving AI enlightenment highway. How do we keep them going in what Heather called the curiosity spiral, so that they keep going and they don't just find an easy answer and regurgitate it? You know, one of the techniques we use as teachers is to get students to put terms in their own words and to rattle around in their brain a little bit. So how do we get them to really go after problem solving and keep using that grit and keep going?
If I can go first, you teed up what I had already written down, which is right the title of this panel is Cultivating Curiosity in the Art of Inquiry. Heather alluded to it a little bit earlier, where we talked about getting to inquiry and curiosity. So I am going to borrow from the great modern philosopher Ted Lasso, right, who said, "Be curious, not judgmental."
Right.
And we think about that, right, and that's how we approach each other. But really in education, when we think of curiosity, we have to think of it differently. For until now, we have rewarded the answer. I come up with the question, can you come up with the answer? And moving forward, because answers are not as hard to get to, they're not as cherished, we're going to have to reward inquiry. Did I, as an educator, prepare you to be inquiring, to think about things in the forward, to address problem solving? And that's one of the things that we've talked a lot about. And one of the values of a college degree in general isn't necessarily somebody who has core critical just knowledge, but it's those problem solving skills. So in different ways throughout our curriculum, those are the things we repetitively put in front of our students. It's like if a gen ed, we call them student learning outcomes. What are the student learning outcomes? And problem solving, critical thinking, we want these embedded throughout our curriculum. So when we tell a future employer, this student is ready for you, that problem solving is there. But moving forward, the problem isn't getting to an answer. The problem is continuing a strong form of inquiry. And so we have to shift our framework in that way.
So I would echo that. So I completely agree with that. I think that this has going to become more important because of AI's tendency to amplify things. So there's, the amplified intelligence or whatever as a catchphrase. So this has a problem to it too, though, which is that at least my observation is that the tendency is not for it to be an equalizer in the classroom by natural direction, right? So the people that were already naturally problem solvers or had been developed that or educated that by the time they get to me naturally latch on to AI and sort of figure out how to use it to its best utility rather quickly. Whereas the people that were already struggling don't. And so you end up with a situation where it is amplifying, right? And I think this is very deep connection to how AI works, right? If we look at, if there were biases in the world, it will amplify the biases. It amplifies basically what existed there previously. And so we have a lot of work to do to very intentionally counteract that, to figure out so it is an amazing, powerful tool and one of the most revolutionary educational tools I think that we'll ever see. But its natural tendency is to just help the people that are already doing well. And so how do we counteract that?
I would just add to that. I think when I think of access on that or equalizer, I think it brings more equal opportunity and access. But to your point, I 100% agree. Then what the human brings to the equation, it's not going to be equal outcome. It's not going to be equal outcome because of what the human brings to it. But the access to how you can get to your outcome, I think, will be more equalized. But we're not taking away that human dynamic. If Casey twice outworks me and she's more naturally gifted than me, we may have the same tool, but her work product and her outcome is going to be differentiated than mine.
But then I also think that we have to ensure that faculty are prepared in ways of being able to recognize that, right? So that, yes, I might be working twice as hard as you, that's always true, isn't it? I mean, come on, Randy. But, one student is working twice as hard, or one student came from a background where they had more access to education and they were better prepared coming in. They had higher test scores or whatever that difference is. We have to make sure that the faculty and the educators are skilled in knowing how to identify and then help support those students too. So it can be an equalizer, but it isn't going to naturally be, right? We still have to intentionally do that preparation and have human educators who can help with facilitating that.
I'd like to add some kind of practical examples of what it looks like to learn with AI just into the mix, because I think one of the ways that I would like to see both RCC and SOU provide that service for students is to just show how easy it is, where Kim Freeze talks about neurodivergent learners, and I believe that we are all, there is no one normal. Each one of us has a different way of learning. And using AI, we can kind of exemplify some of the ways in which we all can take advantage of its unique relationships to information that it brings. And so how many of you remember Thor at the panel yesterday saying how he uses AI not to ask it for information, but he has it interview him. And that was really interesting. Like, that, I believe, stood out. I heard the crowd kind of, react to that. I would like to say, let's kind of mine our relationship to this new technology for new relationships to information, new advantages, so that we don't have the same roadblocks to learning, and maybe that there are solutions that make learning easier than ever before, and I believe they are. One of the advantages from being in a computer science curriculum is problem solving is innately baked into the software development flow, and we take classes on the software. The technological name of problem solving in this sense is computational thinking. We start with pattern recognition. Where are we in relationship to our problem? How can we clearly define our problem? And then we go on to decomposition. Let's break the problem down into as many small subproblems as necessary to get from where we are to where we want to be. And then we put that into action, and we test, and we iterate, and we develop, and we ask questions, and there's a framework for ratcheting ourselves forward into efficiency, into learning, into problem solving, to an outcome that we have kind of clearly defined for ourselves. And I believe that AI collapses that feedback loop. It makes that process almost fun. I find it fun, but I believe it makes it instantaneously fun. If we can clearly articulate to AI, I want to learn this, I am this kind of learner, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, here's what I found works for me in the past, you're like 99% of the way there to having your roadmap to learning that objective. And in that framework, it can be very generalizable to what I believe is every department, every student. And so teaching that process, putting whatever name we want on that, by showing some examples of how AI can be very useful in creating those new relationships to information. Last example I'll give is I was in a calculus class. I struggled with math. I was spending way too much time kind of asking like, okay, I learned it in class, I learned it in the lecture, or maybe I didn't. Let me go read the book again and let me go pour over this information. And it was already like 9 p.m. and I was tired. And I started using AI. I would just started taking photos of the whiteboard, and I would tell ChatGPT, please make me a study guide based off of the stuff we learned today, make it in the format of a math textbook. And so all of the dry erase marker on the whiteboard in handwriting was within 3 minutes a chapter in a math textbook in the simplicity that I needed it to be. And I was able to not waste 3 hours. And I say waste, I'll throw that grenade out there. If it takes you longer than 3 hours to learn something, you're wasting your time now, because these tools are giving you the ability to kind of cut to the chase, to get to that point. What I believe that there is a massive number of those kinds of approaches, and I was able to save time in my learning and make it fun. And I don't think we're going to reach students to show them that they can use these critical skills and use AI in a better way to not just supplant their learning, unless we take the time to find those, categorize them, and incorporate them into our behavior as leaders.
I just want to echo something really quickly here that you said about it being fun and the waste of time. Those two concepts I really appreciate, Ian, because after that horrible first lecture of my academic career, I got some more mentoring. I actually went on and took classes and workshops on best practices in presentations and in speaking, and all of the things that made me a much better educator. And I prided myself on, I still do. I make a mean PowerPoint presentation. And by that, I mean, it is always visually appealing. It has limited words. The fonts are the same. Like, I follow the rules, right? And I tell then stories about whatever the prompts are. So last night, after leaving, I went home and I signed up for Gamma. I'm like, let's see what this does. I want to see what it does. Can it do as good of a job as me? Because I'm good. Oh my gosh. What would have taken me, because it's painstaking to do it too, right? Like, I put out a whole outline, I transfer it over, I find the right pictures. It takes me hours to put together that presentation. I took a 35-page report that I have to give a presentation on in a couple of weeks, and I used Gamma. It is awesome. Oh my gosh. And so those hours of time I can spend thinking more and doing more creativity and more partnership and like all of the things that I love doing, I even texted my friend Joseph last night and said, oh my gosh, guess what? I used Canva and it was so cool. So it is fun. And when we think about that time that we can now use differently, that's a game changer.
I'll give a couple quick examples if I can, if they're quick, hopefully. So yeah, I full disclosure, I have closing keynote this afternoon, and I was like, well, you know, it's an AI conference. I'm going to bring AI in, so I'm on this topic and da. So it's pretty good. ChatGPT and I are pretty good friends at generating content, thoughts, and ideas. It's definitely an idea partner with me. I don't have an artistic bone in my body. I tried to use some of the visual image generators in that, and after an hour and a half of wine glass full of rejection, I got mad and went back to Canva. Like, okay, I know this environment a little bit. So I was like, ooh, and then I even bragged to one of my administrators, look how I'm using Canva now, haha. Then I learned about Canva last night, I'm like, oh no. And so I'm really excited to try this. I haven't done it yet, but I am, as a presenter frequently. But I want to follow up on the fun and wasted time. So another president in the state, I are both co-chairing community colleges' response to the state's wanting to do a financial analysis report on all the colleges, and it's as exciting as it sounds. So we both are figuring out how do we best prepare for this. And she, while on vacation in Mexico for a week, reads a 166-page book that we're using as a resource for this. And I was like, wow, that, you're committed. And I took about 6 minutes in AI and said, I know this book's online. Use this book. Here's my role. Here's my prompt. Here's who I am. What do I need to know from this? How do I need to prepare for it? And I came up with an outline that when I sent it to her, she goes, I think I'll be using this. So neither one of us wanted to be subject matter experts. We wanted to be up to speed on this topic that we have to represent on behalf of our colleagues. I got there in 6 minutes, and she's using my work product after reading the 166-page book. And that's the difference. Now, if I need to be a subject matter expert, I'm going to learn a lot more, but I needed to be in a qualifiable way, knowledgeable to some degree on this topic. And I feel as though I am after 6 minutes, and I didn't have to read the whole book to do it. So I could go back to my golf game and not read the book.
Which reinforces my point that I work twice as hard as you.
Smarter, harder, what are we at?
I want to rewind just a little bit to something that Ian said, talking about Thor's use of the AIs for an interviewer, and how surprising that was to a lot of people. And just sort of, I think that there's a lot of different ways to engage with AI, and it's not at all clear what all of those options are and what the best way to do that is at this moment. And so I've had the blessing of having Ian as a student, and so, which is really why I'm here, is because so you can let your students kind of drag you along. But I think we should not be too prescriptive in the sense that it's not clear what the best way to bring AI into the classroom or not is. So one of the first things I tried right after ChatGPT came out was I got into building chatbots. And so I had this little bot, Frazzle was its name, that was like my little teaching assistant. And I would put in the assignments that I had for the classes, and I would give it little hints and say, don't give them the answer, but give them this and all of that. And like, I'm going to build this little teaching assistant bot, and it's going to be great. It's going to be the personalized education thing. We're going to get Bloom's 2 sigma effect. It's going to be amazing, right? How many times did you use Frazzle, Ian?
I used it once.
Yeah.
That's real quick. Like that's a tension between Professor DeFreez and I. I try to circumnavigate every single guardrail that he puts in regarding AI, and still learn because I still need to learn. But it's an arms race.
Yeah. Very much so. But I think it's easy to fall into the trap to thinking that sort of how people should use AI for their own purpose, but it's about personalization. I think it's much more effective if you do things like format your documents so it's easy to get into ChatGPT for them to use it, or sort of recognizing that somebody's going to use a language model to read your content, and I'll sort of facilitate their use of that and how they could personalize it for themselves, whatever their needs are. They might not even share their needs with you, right? They might, going back to mental health and neurodivergence, like they might not be comfortable telling you how they use AI in order to help themselves, right? And so you don't be prescriptive, but try and facilitate it in various ways.
Okay, we've got about 4 minutes left, and I'd like each of the panelists to give us a lightning round closing and to mention a tool in addition to Gamma that they think is really helpful in learning or teaching. Randy, you want to start us off?
Well, so much to wrap up there. I think what we have to think about in education, and hopefully we've articulated a little bit here, is that learning is going to look a lot different moving forward, and it's going to be our job to make sure that learning is occurring so people are still prepared in different ways for what the future of work and the future of society looks like. I will tell you, I am amazed, and I love, one of my favorite things to do is to surround myself with people who are much smarter than me, and it's usually a really easy task. And in this conference, it absolutely has been learning from these folks who are using so many different tools. And I look at my space in this conversation, and it's more, how can I provide support from the community? How can I provide convening? Because I'll be honest with you, my level of AI predominantly is AI and it's Chat GPT and its kind of subsequent tools there. Now I use AI all the time in my regular life. I'm using it when I shop on Amazon or I watch movies on Netflix without knowing about it. So there's a lot of tools that support me, but I'm at the level of Chat GPT and digging in and taking a lot of notes. So it's not because I'm an AI expert why I'm here. Hopefully people see that what we're trying to do is bring some additional voice to the conversation so these experts aren't working in the shadows and in the corners, but we're putting a spotlight on that work because it's so critical for our region moving forward.
I think I would just want to build on what you said about our region. And I think that we have a chance here in the Rogue Valley to become leaders, not just in the state, but really in the country, in how we leverage AI in education. I think we have this amazing richness here that it might exist in some larger metropolitan areas, but good luck trying to find those people. I moved here from Portland last year, and I can tell you I have such stronger community connections here in the Rogue Valley than I had in the 15 years that I lived in Portland. Now, granted, I'm from Grants Pass, so it already feels like I came back home, but that sense of community that we have here, that is a powerhouse of a benefit that we have this potential to really make a difference. So I'm excited about that for our future in education, K through 12, higher ed. Like, we have what we need to really move this forward. And a tool that I like to use, I use Notebook LM, and I really like using that because I take a lot of notes. When I'm doing like listening sessions. So when I got here last year, I had a workload concern report from faculty. I had a workload concern report from staff. And so I went out on a listening tour, right? So for 3 months, I just went around to every department, every group, and I just took notes in this notebook over and over and over and over again. And then I used that tool to then synthesize things for me because I'm a statistician, but I also love qualitative research. And so I've done a lot of that kind of qualitative narrative analysis work. So that's how I have done it in the past. But now I just put everything into Notebook LM and I ask my questions. And it's using the documents that I've put in to come up with that synthesis.
You're not talking about handwritten notes, right?
No, actually handwritten notes too. Yeah, and then I transform it into a PDF and it transcripts out.
Okay, guys, 10 seconds. One tool
sorry.
each.
AI is cool.
My tool is Python, which most people would say is like not a tool or an AI tool, or it would be only for tech people. And my point is that that's not the case because of AI. People spend a lot of time thinking about what the most general purpose interface is between humans and computers, and that's programming languages. So have AI teach you to code a little bit, and you can build all of these things people are talking about yourself.
All right, before we close, I want to mention that Heather will be giving an expanded version of her talk about the future of work at the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library on Tuesday, I believe. And please do take your quills and papyrus and put out your questions for the community forum at 3 o'clock. So now we know you should spend less than 3 hours learning something. You don't want to be prescriptive. You want to reward your inquiry, your curiosity spiral, and get over your fear of skydiving. Please give a hand to all of our panelists.